Well, looking at the mining sector, we've had uncertainty, of course, recently about talk of nationalisation and resource nationalism. The mining charter, limited growth for junior mining companies in many cases. According to Grant Thornton, only 15% of junior miners believe that the mining charter has been able to transform the industry. Joining me now to look at the junior platinum sector is Paul Smith, who's the Chief Operating Officer at West Sizwe Platinum. Hi, Paul. It's an interesting company to be talking about because over the last few months we've been talking about the producers and all their difficulties and downscaling and closing shafts. West Sizwe, of course, is not yet a producer, and one can see in your financials there's no revenue. You
Correct.
have administrative expenses of the order of 6 million, I think, at the moment. And that's the loss that you are doing. But of course, you are a company that is building up to commissioning your Bakabung mine in 2018 and looking at full production by 2023. So that's by way of saying to you, you must have watched with great interest all these difficulties in the sector. Maybe they'll be resolved by the time you get going.
Well, you know, one would certainly think so and hope so. And obviously we pay very careful attention to what is going on because we're part of this sector and part of the family. But you're absolutely right. We are only, commissioning and building up from 2018, which is, a while away. We've got a big mine to build, a lot of money to spend, and so our focus is focusing, really on the project itself, managing our costs within budget, and obviously staying on schedule with the project. And that's where the bread and butter is for us, and that's where we're focusing. But clearly, yes, we're obviously keeping an eye on the sector, and we contribute where we can in that sector, because as I said, we're part of that family.
What does your company look like right now? Is it you, the chief executive, an accountant, and someone who brings you tea? You don't have a company yet, or do you?
No, we do actually. We are very aggressively putting together an executive team. We have professionals in certain areas is already established, and we are slowly but surely building a senior mine management team as well. In other words, we have already appointed a mine general manager, for example. That is because it is a standalone mine, and we have to have the team ready by the time we're into production. And obviously there's a lot of preparation to do and training at the lower levels to be done.
Is this a good time? I mean, one doesn't want to be a vulture and feed off other people who are distressed, but if these big companies are downsizing, skills become available for people like you?
Well, yes, we would have to manage very carefully how we do these things, but that's why we're taking a very measured approach. And we're slowly but surely making sure that we build a team basically in time for that.
Well, it's not far off, really. It's 4 to 5 years, not far off. Let's talk about that supply and demand cycle. And of course, at the end of last year, the focus was on the oversupply. But of course, the market then adjusts. You reduce the amount of stuff coming onto the market, particularly if most of it's in South Africa. It puts us in a strong position, assuming long-term demand. So how do you see that supply and demand cycle in terms of your mine?
Well, look, I mean, I think if you read what the more capable analysts are saying, and what the suppliers are saying, and have been on record saying, that we are certainly going into a position of undersupply, both for production-related issues, but also demand-related issues, and we all well schooled on global growth. So, but from where we sit, we do see an undersupply scenario developing, particularly for platinum. That's the biggest revenue driver. And obviously the supply side is certainly under a bit of pressure, and we've talked about the issues in terms of the sector. So yes, I mean, in terms of timing, one can never time these things, but
someone said business is easy, it's just the timing.
Well, yeah, and so we remain positive in terms of those scenarios.
Looking at some of the issues that have hit the sector, supply and demand, that's something which has to do with economies and growth. On the other side of it, there are political issues, there are labour issues, and they've really come up in a big bad way at the moment. Perhaps by way of answering that, you can also tell me where you come from in the industry, what your experience has been, and in a way you're in a good position now to be able to learn from mistakes to avoid similar things for your operation.
Well, look, I think we've all learned together, and we've all possibly made mistakes together, and we've all got to take learnings out of this process. And when I say all of us, I mean it's Labour, it's government, and it's the producers. We've all learnt out of this process.
I mean, in your hiring, you must already have discussed, when we hire a workforce,
right.
You've got your manager, but
right.
We're going to do things in a certain way.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think there has been a watershed, and people are paying attention on how do we do this better, how do we do it differently, how do we do it more proactively. And we hope to take, and are taking, those learnings on board in terms of services, in terms of labour, in terms of housing. Very definitely there's a different realisation taking place. And yes, as a new producer, we are in a fortunate position to capitalise on that.
And
yes.
maybe a revision from your original vision, if you see what I mean. When your shareholders first got involved with Wisizwe, a lot of these issues weren't top of mind. You perhaps have adapted.
Yeah, I think if you go back in history and when Wisizwe started, it was a hot sector. Mm. There was a lot of money sloshing around. There were a lot of very excited shareholders, a lot of excited fund managers. Darting around the place, and we're in a fundamentally different realm now. Look, this is a very cyclical sector. Mining generally is cyclical, and people tend to forget that when you have a very long bull run. And historically, platinum did have a very long bull run, so people tended to forget that we are subject to shocks in terms of the sector and prices. Mm. And so there's been a strong realization coming through, absolutely.